Before we begin, find yourself somewhere comfortable. Let your body settle, let your breathing slow, and allow this story to unfold at the pace of starlight. There is nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to solve. If your thoughts drift, that's perfectly fine. The light will still be here when you return. Light is everywhere. It fills the room before we ever notice it, resting quietly on walls, on skin, on the surface of your thoughts. It arrives each morning without effort, and each evening it fades away just as gently, never asking for attention, never explaining itself. You have lived your entire life surrounded by light. You have never reached out and touched it, yet it touches you constantly. It wakes you, it warms you, it tells you where you are in the world. Without it, the universe would still exist, but it would be forever unseen, silent in its beauty. And yet, for something so familiar, something so deeply woven into every moment of living, light remains one of the most mysterious things we know. For centuries, the greatest minds have tried to answer a question that sounds simple, almost childlike in its innocence. What is light? Not how bright it is, or how fast it travels, or how to bend it through glass, but what it truly is beneath all appearances. Is it a thing, or emotion, or something stranger still? Is it substance, or behaviour, or merely a relationship between the world and the eyes that observe it? The question has never fully settled. Even now, after generations of experiments and equations, light refuses to give us a single, comfortable answer. It behaves beautifully when we are not watching too closely, and oddly when we are. It seems to follow rules and then quietly steps around them. You see light every day, but you do not experience it directly. What you experience is colour, warmth, contrast, the soft difference between shadow and glow. Light itself is invisible. You only notice it when it meets something else, when it reflects, when it scatters, when it leaves a trace of itself behind. The glow of a screen late at night, the pale spill of moonlight across a quiet floor, the deep gold of a sunset dissolving into blue. These are not light itself, but light interacting with matter, with air, with dust, with the shape of the world. Light reveals everything except its own nature. This mystery is not new. Long before laboratories and instruments, before lenses and measurements, humans were already wondering about the same thing. They stood beneath the sun and felt its warmth without understanding how something so distant could reach them at all. They watched fire dance and flicker in the darkness and sensed that whatever made the world visible must be powerful, perhaps alive, perhaps sacred. In those early moments of thought, light was not just a physical phenomenon. It was the boundary between safety and danger, between knowing and not knowing. Darkness hid things, light revealed them. And so the question of light became, quietly, a question about ourselves, about perception, about awareness, about the strange fact that the universe can be seen at all. Even today, with all our tools, the mystery remains close to that original wonder. Light behaves in ways that feel intuitive right up until the moment they don't. It travels unimaginably fast, yet can be delayed, bent, stretched, and slowed. It spreads like a wave, flowing outward through space, and yet sometimes arrives as if it were a single tiny point, precise and indivisible. When we try to define it too sharply, it softens. When we insist on certainty, it offers paradox instead. There is something comforting in this. The universe has not given away all its secrets. Some questions are allowed to stay open, breathing gently across centuries, inviting curiosity without demanding resolution. You do not need to understand light to live within it. You never have. It has always accompanied you quietly, whether you are thinking about it or not. And perhaps that is why this story begins not with answers, but with a feeling. The feeling of standing at the edge of knowing, looking into something familiar and realizing it is deeper than it appears. The feeling that knowledge does not always replace mystery, but can deepen it instead. As we move forward, we will step back in time to when humans first tried to explain how seeing itself might work. Before equations, before experiments, before certainty. Back to the earliest attempts to understand what it means for light to exist at all. There is no rush to get there. The light has waited this long. The question lingers gently from where we left it, like a soft glow that remains even after the sun has slipped below the horizon. If light feels mysterious now, It felt even more so to those who first tried to understand it, not with instruments or equations, but with thought alone, with patience, and with long hours of quiet observation. Imagine a world without artificial light. No lamps waiting at the flick of a switch, no screens glowing softly in the dark. Night arrived completely, and when it did, it took everything with it. The stars were sharp and countless, the moon a pale companion, and fire the only moving light humans could make for themselves. In that world, light did not feel ordinary, it felt alive. The earliest thinkers did not separate light from seeing. To them, vision itself was the mystery. How does the world enter the mind? How does shape, distance, and colour travel from stone and leaf into awareness? Some imagined that light flowed outward, not inward, that the eyes sent something into the world, thin and invisible, reaching outward like gentle threads that touched objects and returned with knowledge. Seeing was not passive, it was an act, a reaching. Others believed the opposite, that the world sent something toward us instead, a presence moving through the space between object and observer, crossing the darkness to meet the eye. Light, in this view, was not a thing you possessed, but something you received. There was no agreement, only conversation stretching across generations. What mattered was not who was right, but that the question itself was being held carefully, like a smooth stone passed from hand to hand. These early ideas were shaped by what could be felt and seen. Sunlight warmed skin, fire flickered and danced, reflections shimmered on water, shadows softened at the edges instead of cutting cleanly into darkness. Light seemed to behave less like an object and more like a presence, sometimes sharp, sometimes gentle, sometimes obedient, sometimes wild. It did not sit still long enough to be captured by simple explanation. For centuries the question remained suspended, not abandoned, just waiting. Then, slowly the world changed. Glass became clearer, lenses grew more precise, dark rooms were built not for sleeping but for thinking. Light was no longer only something to live within, it became something to experiment with. When beams were bent through glass and spread into colours, something quietly revolutionary happened. Light began to reveal structure. Patterns appeared where there had once been only glow. And yet, even as knowledge deepened, certainty did not. Each answer seemed to uncover a new layer of mystery beneath it. Light could be separated, reflected, slowed, shaped, but never fully explained. What these centuries of wondering share is a kind of humility, a recognition that understanding takes time, and that some questions are not meant to be rushed. Stone wears smooth underwater not because the water is forceful, but because it is patient. The people who first asked what light was did not know how long the journey would be. They could not have imagined that the same question would echo into laboratories filled with mirrors and detectors, into equations written late at night, into debates that would unsettle even the most confident minds. But the feeling was the same, a quiet curiosity, a willingness to sit with not knowing. Light has always invited that posture. It does not demand belief. It does not insist on certainty. It simply continues to be, arriving each morning, leaving each evening, unchanged by how much or how little we think we understand it. As we move forward, the pace will remain slow, the ideas will grow more precise, but the mystery will not disappear. In the next chapter, two different visions of light will take shape, each convincing, each incomplete, and each reflecting something deeply human about our need for clarity and our discomfort with ambiguity. There is no need to choose sides yet. For now, it is enough to notice how long we have been asking, and how gently the question has carried us this far. The questions we've been carrying now begin to lean gently toward form, as if curiosity itself were looking for a shape to rest in. After centuries of wondering, light was finally about to be described in two very different ways, each calm and convincing, each incomplete in its own quiet way. One vision imagined light as something solid, though unimaginably small, tiny pieces moving swiftly through space, like fine grains of sand carried on a steady wind. In this view, light travelled in straight lines, bouncing cleanly from surfaces, obeying simple rules that felt reassuringly familiar. It reflected the way stones skip across still water, predictable and direct, each motion following from the last. This idea brought comfort. Particles were understandable. They could be counted, tracked, imagined as real things with definite positions and paths. If light were made of such pieces, then the world made sense in a way the human mind appreciated. Causes led to effects, paths could be traced, shadows should fall sharply where light did not reach. For a time, this picture felt complete enough. Mirrors reflected, objects cast shadows. Light seemed to behave like something thrown across space, arriving exactly where it was aimed. But even as this view settled in, there were small details that refused to stay quiet. Shadows softened at their edges instead of ending abruptly. Light slipped through narrow openings and spread out in ways that did not resemble flying grains at all. Where certainty was expected, there was blur. Another vision began to surface, slower and more fluid. It imagined light not as a thing moving through space, but as a motion itself, a gentle disturbance rippling outward the way waves move across a calm lake after a stone is dropped. In this view, light did not travel alone. It spread, overlapped, and interacted with itself. Waves felt different from particles. They were less about location and more about pattern. They explained why light could bend softly around edges, why brightness faded gradually into shadow, why colours could stretch and separate like reflections in water. But waves too carried unease. Waves usually needed something to move through. Water waves needed water. Sound waves needed air. If light was a wave, then what was waving in the empty darkness between stars? To answer that question, an invisible presence was imagined, filling all of space, perfectly still and perfectly rigid, yet somehow able to carry the fastest motion in the universe. It was a quiet compromise, a background assumption meant to keep the idea intact, and so the two visions lived side by side. Particles offered clarity and certainty, waves offered elegance and explanation. Each solved problems the other could not. The universe, it seemed, was unwilling to choose. This quiet disagreement was not a battle so much as a long conversation. Ideas passed back and forth like smooth stones, tested in thought, turned over in the mind, set down gently when they failed to fit. Neither picture could be dismissed entirely. Neither could claim the whole truth. What makes this moment remarkable is not the conflict itself, but the patience with which it unfolded. No one rushed to force an answer. Light continued to arrive each morning, indifferent to how it was described. Experiments were repeated slowly, carefully, allowing the world to speak in its own time. There is something deeply human in this phase of the story. Our desire for certainty meeting a reality that offers complexity instead. Our wish for simple categories encountering a universe that prefers nuance. Light, once again, refused to be pinned down. When treated like particles, it behaved mostly as expected, but never entirely. When treated like waves, it flowed beautifully, but left questions unanswered. This was not failure, it was an invitation. The more carefully light was observed, the clearer it became that understanding would not come from choosing one description and discarding the other. Something more subtle was waiting, something that would require letting go of the need for either-or answers. As we continue, the story will move from ideas into moments, into rooms darkened on purpose, into narrow openings cut with care, into patterns that appeared quietly on distant surfaces. Experiments simple enough to explain in a whisper, yet profound enough to change how we see reality itself. For now, it is enough to rest in this tension. Particles and waves, certainty and softness, stone and water. Light holds them all, patiently, as it always has. The ideas we have been carrying now step gently into a room made intentionally dark. Not a place of mystery meant to frighten, but a quiet space where light itself can be watched without interruption, where its behaviour can be allowed to unfold slowly without expectation. Imagine a narrow beam entering the darkness, calm and steady, like a thin stream of water guided through stone. It approaches a small opening, nothing dramatic, just a careful cut that invites passage. On the far side, a surface waits patiently, ready to receive whatever arrives. If light were only particles, this moment should be simple. Each tiny piece would pass through the opening and land straight ahead, forming a clear and orderly mark. Cause and effect would remain aligned, the way footsteps leave prints in soft sand. But what appears on the waiting surface is something else entirely. Instead of a single bright region, light arranges itself into a quiet pattern of repetition. Bright bands emerge where light gathers, separated by darker spaces where it seems to withdraw. Not randomness, not disorder, but structure. Gentle, deliberate, and unexpected. This is not how stones behave when thrown. This is how waves behave when they overlap. Like ripples spreading across a still pond, light seems to interfere with itself. Where crests meet, brightness grows. Where crest meets trough, light fades away, leaving darkness not as absence, but as balance. The room remains silent as this pattern settles into place. Nothing rushes, nothing announces itself. What makes this moment remarkable is not the complexity of the setup, but its simplicity. No elaborate machinery is required, just light, an opening, and patience. Here, the wave-like nature of light stops being an idea and becomes a presence. It shows itself not through force, but through repetition, through rhythm, through the soft mathematics of overlap. And yet, even now, the story does not settle. Because this wave behaviour appears even when light is dimmed until it barely seems present at all, even when light arrives in such a faint whisper that it feels almost alone. Imagine allowing light to pass through this opening, one tiny arrival at a time. Not a flood, not a stream, but individual moments separated by quiet pauses. Each arrival leaves a single, delicate mark on the surface beyond. At first, there is no pattern, just isolated points, scattered gently like grains of sand falling one by one. Nothing connects them, nothing suggests order. But as time passes, something extraordinary begins to happen. Those individual marks, placed without apparent coordination, slowly begin to reveal the same pattern seen before. Bright regions form where many marks gather. Dark spaces persist where marks almost never appear. It is as if each arrival knows something about the others, as if light, even when it seems alone, carries within it a memory of possibility. This is the moment where patience becomes essential. Nothing dramatic occurs quickly. The pattern emerges the way stone is shaped by water, not through force, but through persistence. Each arrival is quiet. Each one behaves like a particle when it lands, precise and localized. And yet, taken together, they trace the outline of a wave. This is where the old certainty finally dissolves. Light does not choose between being a particle or a wave. It moves gently between those descriptions, depending on how it is allowed to travel, depending on how closely it is asked to explain itself. There is no betrayal here, no trick. Only a reminder that the universe is not obligated to fit comfortably inside human categories. What makes this discovery unsettling is not that it is strange, but that it is consistent. The pattern never wavers. Repeat the process again and again, and light responds the same way, calm and reliable in its refusal to be simple. The darkness of the room becomes a collaborator rather than an obstacle. It holds space for light to show its subtler behaviours, the ones easily drowned out by brightness and noise. This is not a revelation meant to shock. It unfolds gently, like a truth that has always been present, waiting for the right conditions to be noticed, and there is something deeply soothing in that realization. The universe is not chaotic at its core, it is careful, it is patterned, it is patient. Light does not hurry to explain itself, it allows understanding to arrive gradually, if it arrives at all. As we sit with this moment, it becomes clear that what has been revealed is not just a property of light, but a hint about reality itself, that what appears solid may also be spread out, that what seems singular may contain many paths at once. The room remains dark, the surface remains still, the pattern holds. In the next chapter, this quiet mystery deepens, because when we try to look more closely, when we ask a light to tell us which path it takes, something subtle changes. The pattern softens, then fades, not in defiance, but as if responding gently to attention itself. For now, it is enough to rest here, in the darkened room, watching light do what it has always done, patient and unhurried, revealing just enough to keep the question alive. The pattern we left behind does not vanish abruptly. It fades, the way ripples soften when the water grows still, not because something has gone wrong, but because something has been touched too closely. Up to now, light has been allowed to move freely. It has passed through openings, spread into possibilities, and settled gently into patterns without being questioned too directly. But curiosity, patient as it is, eventually leans in a little closer. What happens, we wonder quietly, if we ask light to tell us which way it goes? Imagine the same darkened room, the same careful openings, the same waiting surface beyond. Everything is familiar. Only one thing changes. A gentle attempt is made to notice, to keep track, to know, not to interfere, not to block, just to observe. And something subtle responds. The flowing pattern that once formed so patiently begins to lose its clarity. The bright regions soften. The dark spaces begin to fill in. The calm rhythm dissolves into something more ordinary, more predictable. Light no longer behaves as if it is exploring many paths at once. It begins to act as though it has chosen a single route, a single story to tell. Nothing dramatic announces this change. There is no sound, no flash, no resistance. Just a quiet shift, like water changing direction when it meets a stone. This is not because light is fragile, it is because information has entered the scene. To ask which path light takes is to place a kind of marker in the darkness. A record, however faint, that says this happened here and not there. And once that record exists, even briefly, the behavior changes. It is tempting to think of this as light reacting to being watched, but that is not quite right. It is not attention that matters, and not awareness in the human sense. It is the presence of information itself, the quiet fact that something in the universe now knows. Light, when allowed to remain uncertain, spreads like water across stone. Light, when asked to commit, becomes precise, narrow, contained. Neither behavior is more real than the other. Both are expressions of the same underlying presence. This is where the old language finally begins to strain. Particle and wave are no longer opposites in conflict. They are moods, tendencies, ways light responds to context. When light is free of records, it behaves like possibility itself, existing not as a single path, but as many overlapping ones. When light leaves a trace, when its journey is marked even gently, it settles into something more definite. There is a quiet lesson here, one that extends beyond physics. Certainty narrows, possibility expands. This does not mean certainty is wrong, only that it comes with a cost. Light does not resist being known, it simply changes in the presence of knowing. Each arrival still lands as a single point, precise and unmistakable. But the graceful pattern that once emerged over time no longer forms. The universe has traded depth for clarity. There is no failure in this exchange, only balance. For a long time, this behavior felt unsettling. It seemed to suggest that reality itself was somehow undecided until questioned, that outcomes waited quietly for permission to exist, that the act of asking could shape the answer. But with patience, a calmer interpretation emerges. Light is not confused, it is responsive. It listens to the conditions it is given, and within those conditions it behaves consistently, reliably, almost gently. It does not hide its nature. It reveals different aspects of itself depending on how much space it is allowed. In darkness, with no records kept, it moves like water, exploring all the contours of possibility. Under observation, with paths labelled and histories fixed, it behaves like stone, solid, and singular. Both are true, neither is the whole story. This understanding does not resolve the mystery, it softens it. It reminds us that the universe may not be built from rigid answers, but from relationships, between observer and observed, between question and condition, between openness and certainty. Light becomes a quiet teacher here, not by instruction, but by example. It shows that sometimes, to see more, we must ask less, and sometimes, to know precisely, we must accept losing the wider picture. As this chapter draws to a close, there is no need to hold tightly to any conclusion. The story is not finished yet. The mystery is not closing in, it is opening outward. In the next chapter, this relationship between knowing and being will stretch even further, crossing distances that seem impossible, connecting moments and places in ways that challenge our sense of separation. For now, it is enough to rest with this gentle truth. Light does not choose sides. It responds patiently and faithfully to the way we meet it. The story has been moving gently outward, from the quiet familiarity of a light around us, through patterns and questions, through certainty softening into possibility. Now it arrives at a place where distance itself seems to lose meaning, where light no longer feels like something that simply travels, but something that connects. Imagine two moments born together, not close in space, but close in origin. A single event gives rise to two gentle flashes, paired from the very beginning, then sent drifting apart. One moves left, the other right, each slipping into darkness, each carrying with it a trace of the same beginning. They separate quickly. Distance grows between them, faster than the mind can comfortably follow. Rooms, buildings, landscapes, even planets could come to lie between them. And still, something quiet remains shared. When one is finally met, when it is allowed to settle into a definite state, the other responds, not after a delay, not as a message travelling through space, but as if the connection had never stretched at all. This is not motion in the usual sense. Nothing rushes between them. No signal crosses the darkness. And yet, the relationship holds. At first, this feels unsettling. We are accustomed to thinking of the universe as built from separate things, each minding its own place, each bound by distance and time. Light has already asked us to loosen that picture, to accept that paths can overlap, that outcomes can remain undecided. Now it asks us to loosen it further. These paired moments do not carry individual instructions waiting to be revealed. They carry possibility together. Only when one is asked to choose does the shared story resolve, and it resolves all at once. There is no sense of effort here, no drama. The universe does not strain to maintain the connection. It simply behaves as if separation were not quite as final as it appears. This does not allow messages to be sent faster than light. Nothing useful can be signalled, nothing controlled. The outcomes remain gentle and random, like leaves choosing where to land. But the correlations are there, quiet and precise, woven into the fabric beneath appearances. What this suggests is not that the universe is chaotic, but that it is deeply relational, that things are not defined only by where they are, but by how they belong together. Light, once again, is our guide. It shows us that connection does not always require contact, and that distance does not always imply separation. It hints that space itself may be less like a container and more like a pattern that emerges from deeper links. For some, this realization has felt deeply uncomfortable. It seems to challenge the idea of an objective world unfolding independently of observation. It suggests that outcomes may not exist fully until they are met, that reality crystallizes gently, moment by moment. Others find a strange comfort in it. There is something calming about a universe that does not rush to decide, that allows possibilities to coexist quietly until they are needed, that values relationship over isolation. Light does not force this interpretation. It simply behaves the way it behaves, consistent and patient, allowing meaning to grow around it slowly like moss on stone. As this journey comes to rest, there is no final answer waiting at the end, no single sentence that explains what light truly is. Instead, there is a posture we are invited to adopt, a posture of patience, of curiosity without urgency, of acceptance that some mysteries are not obstacles, but companions. Light has been with us the entire time. It was there at the beginning of this story, warming skin, filling rooms, guiding eyes. It remains now, unchanged by how deeply we have looked into it. If anything, it feels quieter than before, less demanding, more generous. You do not need to hold all of this in mind. You do not need to resolve it. The universe is not keeping score. It is enough to notice that the darkness is not empty, that connection can exist without touch, that understanding can deepen without closing. If your thoughts begin to drift here, let them. The light will continue its journey without you. It always has. And when morning comes again, when light returns to familiar places, it will do so with the same gentle mystery it has always carried, patient, unhurried, and quietly whole. As this story comes to rest, there is no final answer waiting in the dark. Light does not offer conclusions the way books do. It offers presence. It remains what it has always been, arriving without announcement, leaving without explanation, touching everything and asking nothing in return. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson it leaves us with. that not everything must be fully understood to be meaningful, that mystery does not weaken truth, but deepens it. The universe does not rush. Stars take their time. Stone yields slowly to water. Light itself has travelled for millions of years just to arrive softly on your face. And so it is okay now to let the questions loosen their grip. It is okay if some ideas remain unfinished, if some thoughts dissolve before they settle. This story was never meant to be held tightly. It was meant to be drifted through. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. If your thoughts are wandering, let them wander. The light will continue its quiet work without you watching. And if you found calm here, if these moments of wonder brought you a little peace, you can support this space simply by staying connected, by subscribing, by sharing it with someone who might need a quiet night, by letting this small corner of the universe grow gently, one listener at a time. For now, there is nothing more to do. No more to understand, no more to follow. Just rest. Let the darkness be kind. Let the light wait until morning. Good night.